take your place immediately. Couldn't do that. No can do any longer by the late 1960s. So by the late 1960s, people, in particular in Fiat, but in other industrial sectors in northern Italy, were engaging in extremely sophisticated activities aimed at sabotaging the company, right? In order to gain really, really significant concessions, not just about the working conditions and the wages and things like that, but about the way the social factory that was Turin at the time functioned. Okay. So it's like, what are those guys in that factory doing? Let's go find out. Let's find out what they're doing, how they're struggling, how we can help them struggle, how we can circulate that struggle so that it's, the guys at this factory over down the street also know what's going on, are on the same page. We can circulate struggles. Once that wildcat strike is over, this one can begin, and then that way we can frighten the government, not just the board of directors of Fiat, but the government into making real concessions that are truly going to affect the conditions under which we're living and working. Okay. Let's not sit around and figure out how to correctly understand what is to be done. This isn't the road, from the perspective of the Italian New Left, in the context of a completely useless Italian Communist Party. This is not the perspective on how to truly make ground vis-a-vis the project of ameliorating the conditions under which people were living and working. Okay. Yes.
It seems that
young man.
Thank you. It seems that then in this case their critique of Marxist-Leninism is way off, and there's three big reasons why. Is one, there's a way even under Marxist-Leninism to do with a corrupt party, splits and purges.
Oh, you don't think that took place in Italy in the beginning, in the late 40s, the 50s, and the 60s? There were all kinds of splits, and people weren't hung, but were run out of town on a rail. Oh, that was taking place throughout this time period. Well, nothing was getting done.
Okay, fair enough.
Nothing positive was getting done.
The second.
Isn't that normal fare for Italy, though?
Isn't that what?
I said, isn't that normal fare for Italy, though?
Yeah, that's why you got about the Italians. They're a bunch of hotheads, and it's like, Giuseppe.
Football.
No, I'm not going to work longer.
The second thing is this. In that case, the autonomous Marxists didn't go with the party. And what the party offers that autonomous Marxists apparently don't know or don't care about is to begin to institutionalize the organs of revolutionary struggle. Now, of course, right, you can say, oh, but they're with direct workers' struggle, et cetera, and that's all great. But then, and this is the third one, if we're talking about actual context, isn't the very lack of organization what ultimately doomed the Italian New Left? Isn't this the lack of party formal organization which led to them essentially being slaughtered by the Italian government? Because I think if Lenin, under the Tsar, can manage to keep a functioning revolutionary movement going, it seems that with all the access that the Italian New Left had to Western technology and distribution, they should have been able to keep something going as well. I mean, shouldn't? So again, each one of those is unique but linked critique of, it seems to me, autonomous Marxism or the New Left.
Well, the New Left, which again was, what was the New Left? It wasn't one movement. It was multiple, right? Fractious, fractured, very Italian. And yeah, it imploded. There are three basic problems that face any so-called self-defining Marxist materialist theory. There's the question of class composition, the question of organization, and the question of crisis. Right? What is going to constitute a true crisis, i.e. a real opportunity for significant transformation in material and social conditions of relations of production? As far as the multiple movements that are associated with the Italian New Left, yeah, ultimately it was organization that did them in the end. They became too disorganized, too fractured, too stratified, but I think on their view, that merely reflected a mirror crisis of class composition. What is the class? How do we find class? How do we define class struggle? Who? What interests? What needs? What desires? The 60s and 70s in Italy, may you be doomed to live in interesting times. Very interesting times. Rapid transformations were taking place throughout all of Italy that led to a crisis within the movements that were attempting to theorize this from the perspective of class composition. How is the class, how is it composed, how is it structured, how then can we organize? And yeah, it failed on both accounts, yeah. But, again, they're going to say, look, fall down, stand up, try again. That's Marx, right? That's Marx. And again, they're going to say, look, what we're all about is that little quote that I read from Panzieri. What we're all about, and what you don't find in communism, what you don't really find in Marxism-Leninism is, again, as in the words of Panzieri in 1957, the goal of restoring Marxism to its natural terrain, which is that of permanent critique.
Would you say the freedom of criticism? Would you say that it's the freedom of criticism?
That it's the freedom of criticism? I don't understand.
That quote necessarily entails that there's freedom to criticize the party, criticize everything. Like the quote you're reading, right?
Yeah.
It should be a critique, right? Marxism should be a critique of what? Of the party, the failed communist states, the criticism of...
It should be a critique that begins with, again, and this is the Italian New Left rather than orthodox Marxism or critical theory, that begins with the actual activity of the mass, of working class people. That begins with what they are actually doing, the lives that they are actually living, the struggles that they are engaged in, the organization that they are attempting, the hopes and desires and needs that they are expressing. That is where revolutionary transformation begins. And that's where the focus ought to begin. Not necessarily end, but begin. And you got to also remember that most of these guys got their, cut their teeth in the 50s, basically in various factions, renegade factions of the Italian Communist Party. Right? And they left because they became disgusted with it. And they themselves, they joined the party because they recognized that, yes, the question of political organization, right? And the structure of the state is important. And in some instances, at least, is a central and crucial issue. So that's why these guys joined the Italian Communist Party in the first place. They left it because they became convinced that, given the context, given the socio-historical situation and the material conditions of production that existed, and the transformations that were taking place, the party is not helping us and it's not going to help us. And we need to go back to the workers themselves and their spontaneous activities of organization and struggle. Again, these guys would say, and this is just Marx, this is just Marx. Context, 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 context.
So to basically sum up the autonomous Marxist theory would be that through these three strategies, one's capitalism, and now that it has, I should say, expanded worldwide, globally, if you get behind these worker struggles, different places, and then circulate them on an international level, eventually capitalism will...
There's no prediction. There's no prediction. But
there's just circulation.
The insight is that positive transformation has always only started with and ultimately taken place because of the actual activity of working people. That historically has been the only way, the only path towards positive beneficial transformation.